All right, I'm going to call to order this meeting of the Nevada Commission on Off-Highway Vehicles. It is 9:30 on May 29th. We'll start with the pledge. Do we have? Yes, we have a flag. Mr. Lambert, would you care to lead us in the pledge? Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, could we have the roll call, Madam Secretary? Hear us down there in Vegas?
Yeah, we can hear you. Can you hear us?
Okay, we're doing the roll call.
Cannot hear her. We cannot hear Kim.
Commissioner Cox?
Present.
Commissioner Elmore?
Present.
Commissioner Baker?
Present.
Commissioner Giroux? Commissioner Griggs?
Present.
Chair Jackson?
Present.
Commissioner Lambert?
Present.
Commissioner Lee?
Present.
Commissioner Richardson?
Here.
Commissioner McKay?
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. All right, let's do a couple of quick housekeeping things. I'm going to bring item number 11 forward to earlier in the agenda, which is the DMV report. I'm going to move regulation back a little bit, and because of some issues with time, I'm going to bring the election forward probably to around item 8. All right, so let's get started. Number 5, minutes from previous meetings. Has everybody seen the minutes? Oh, you know what? You're absolutely right. I apologize. I skipped one. Let's redo this. Item number 4, public comment. Do we have any public comment in Las Vegas?
We do not.
Is there any public comment in Elko?
No public here at this time.
All right, I believe we have public comment here. If you would like to make a public comment, you have 3 minutes. Please step forward, state your name and the name of your organization if applicable. Anyone? Please step up now.
My name is Carol Vance. I'm Vice President of the Nevada Four-Wheel Drive Association. I'm from Dayton, and I had a couple of things that I had noticed from looking at some of the meetings past yesterday as I was preparing for today. One of the things that I was curious about, is there any kind of public accounting record available for the public from the Commission? And the other thing that I have been past president of a four-wheel drive association in California. One of the things that we very strongly were involved in was recording our motions as written by the motion maker. And in our Nevada Four-Wheel Drive Association, we do that as well. And I was wondering if that could be a procedure that the Commission could do, in that a motion made by a motion maker and seconded by a seconder could be recorded in writing. Thank you.
One question, Ms. Vance.
Yes.
When you're saying accounting, are you talking about the financials?
Yes.
Okay, they're public information, but hold on one second. Kim, do you have copies of past financials or any of the records?
I do not have copies of any financial records.
Mr. Cox,
Yes.
do we have copies of financials that can be made available to the public?
And make copies of financials for the public, yes.
Oh, give me one second. Give me one second. If you'd like to make a and again, we're not sure on some of the procedural things here, so we don't want to misstep. But the bottom line is it's public information and should be made aware to the public. I'm going to check into whether it can be posted on the website or not. I'm pretty sure it can, but again, we don't want to make mistakes. But if you send an email to our secretary, Kim, she'll be happy to contact Mr. Cox, and he'll be able to provide you with any reasonable amount of record you need.
I appreciate it.
No
And
problem.
It would be nice to have it on the website for everyone to see.
And again, Mr. Richardson had sort of suggested that just now, but I don't know the answer. I just asked counsel, and he would have to look into it first. So again, I can only go by what I'm told by counsel.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else? Thank you, ma'am.
Good morning. I'm Scott Gers with the Nevada Trail Stewards. I have 2 letters from stewards that were requested to be read into record today, so I told them that I would bring those and read them on their behalf today. The first one starts with, please make sure the money garnered from the mandated registration program stays within the confines of trail stewardship. Please spend money wisely on opening more trails to ride for motorcycles, ATVs, and off-road vehicles. Trail stewardship, by definition, means the activity or job of protecting and being responsible for trails. Please continue to improve and create more trails for users. Please refurbish old, dilapidated, unusable, and dangerous trails by committing to trail days where the public goes out and helps build and maintain trails. This has worked extremely well in the mountain biking community. When the public helps build or maintain a trail, they tend to have more pride of ownership and take better care of the trails and the outdoors in general. Also, please use this money to put trash cans at the most commonly used staging areas and pay for the trash removal. I know, pack it in, pack it out, but there are people who don't follow this common sense law of the outdoors. Sadly, they will pack it in and throw it out onto the desert if there are no trash cans available. Please protect our trails and access to public lands. Do not Californiate Nevada. And this is by Robert Floyd, a Nevada trail steward, and I have a copy for the secretary. The second one starts as a lifelong snowmobiler. It is apparent that Nevada has only 3 major areas to ride snowmobiles: Lamoille Canyon, Spooner Summit, and the limited area on the north side of the Mount Rose Highway towards the tower. As a participant in Nevada's OHV program, I do sincerely question the destination of the snowmobile monies and wonder what is my snowmobile registration fee actually doing to support the sport of snowmobiling in Nevada. Where is my snowmobile money actually going, and to what benefit as a Nevadan is this program going to do for me and my family? Also, there were statements in the initial registration process that suggested state-to-state reciprocity of the Nevada OHV program, and while there may be some legitimacy in the motocross and ATV world, except when traveling to Wyoming, they require out-of-state OHV tags. The snowmobile aspects of this statement is absolutely incorrect in that states such as Wyoming, Utah, Idaho, Colorado, and Montana require out-of-state registration permits to be obtained to pay for grooming, warming huts, parking areas, and search and rescue programs. So as a Nevada resident and a snowmobiler, please explain to me where the money from the snowmobile program registration is going. To what benefit the statement of the state-to-state reciprocity was to me as a snowmobiler, as the statement, if it had been researched from the initial process, would have been found to be incorrect. My final statement, while there is a registration program in place as a snowmobiler, I find no particular reason or rationale for continued support of this program. 70% of my riding is located in California, and the Nevada OHV program does not support the grooming program on the trails that we ride. As Nevada has very limited, highlighted, riding areas, the other 30% of my riding is done in Colorado, Utah, Wyoming, and Idaho. That again, I do not recognize the Nevada OHV registration. They do not recognize the Nevada OHV registration, as stated by the OHV Commission selling point in the initial OHV program's rollout statement. I find that continued support of the Nevada OHV program for snowmobiles is frankly a taxation without representation, and I ask that snowmobiles be removed immediately from the OHV program, since there are absolutely zero benefits, as the riding in Nevada is extremely limited and we are very restricted by the U.S. Forest Service. Please review Nevada snowmobile areas and see the amount of public land available to ride. Thank you, Travis Dunn. I suggested that Mr. Dunn contact Mr. McKay, if that's okay with you, and I'll send him your information, and I'll give both of these with their contacts to Kim. We had two comments today from the Trail Stewards. We noticed, first of all, it's great to see the full agenda and a lot of exciting items on the agenda, getting secretaries paid and committee reports, elections, obviously, and DMV reports, treasurer's reports, all looking forward to all of these things. A lot of questions have been coming in about the additional addition of a phone line for public during the meetings. So a lot of the public is pretty excited to hear about this. And the first thing we were curious about, with the secretaries being paid, we see that there's Kathy Gross' name is noted in there, but we don't see anything referring to Joanna Schumacher, who obviously worked as on state matters and sent out emails. And
I'm sorry, but we should be, if that's an agenda item, it needs to be talked about in during that specific agenda item, and we do have one with regard.
Thank you, Commissioner Baker.
And are we?
Go ahead.
Are we complying with the 2-minute rule to get through the agenda today?
I know. I'm giving Mr. Gus a little bit of latitude because he's reading a couple of those, but he is correct, Mr. Gus. If you could wrap it up.
So would you like this to be brought up? You'll bring up Joanna Schumacher and the secretaries?
One of the commissioners can bring that up during that discussion.
Thank you, Ms. Baker, for moving me along. I appreciate that. My last comment is, as we consider a new face for the commission today, I'd like to keep in mind that the OHV public and the community has a significant desire for a courteous, involved participant who's going to be really working with the OHV community in an open fashion here. So in the spirit of closing up and being sweet, the Trail Stewards brought some donuts for everybody.
All right. Is there any other public comment?
I'm sorry, just to be
Go
clear,
ahead, sir.
I'm not sure that discussion of an additional secretary who was not referenced on the agenda and any action taken towards payment can take place at this meeting for purposes of the open meeting law. That was not on the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Hastings. Is there anyone else who would like to make public comments? Going once, going twice. All right. All right. We're going to move on to agenda item number 5, minutes. Do we have a motion to approve all or some or one of the sets of minutes? Mr. Lambert?
Hello, this is Gary Lambert. For the record, I have not received the DVDs as promised in the earlier motion, so I suspect that we need to rescind the motion, and this is improperly itemized or agendized. I have contacted multiple people. I've received emails that indicated that I'd received them, but it's not true. I have yet to receive any of the documents in that motion. The minutes were to be provided, and those recordings 4 days, business days prior to any vote. I believe we would have to rescind the earlier motion on the agenda before we could vote on this. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Lambert, you were given at least one DVD at the meeting, is that correct?
No, sir, I was not. I was given an audio tape. I've yet to receive any DVDs, and I'm sure that you're aware of other requests for that information.
Well, to be honest with you, as far as I was concerned, you were given those because you'd made no effort to contact me and say you hadn't.
Due to your actions, I've been instructed to deal entirely with the Secretary and the AG's office, and I've informed both of them that I have not received those documents and videotapes, and I'm sure you're aware of it. Thank you.
Okay. Given Mr. Lambert's objections, are there any other comments or motions from anyone on the commission?
This is Commissioner Richardson.
Go ahead, sir.
When can we get Mr. Lambert what he needs?
I can have those burned this afternoon, this evening, and put them in the mail tomorrow or get in.
Did you not get that information from Ms. Gross that he was looking for this stuff?
To my understanding, I thought he had it.
Okay.
And I have the video from.
As was mine. So now it's all in the open. COB today?
So, yeah, I can get them burned. I don't have video from the 6th. I have video from the 12th and then the March 20th.
Gary, can you set a timeline with her to make sure you're covered? Please.
I'd be glad to meet with you. Was not the meeting on the 6th held here? And I believe that the commission received that data from publications in my conversations with them.
Okay, I know for sure that I have the 12th and the 20th. Off the top of my head, I don't know. I can't remember.
I don't know.
Well, why don't you meet with Mr. Lambert after this meeting, and then you can get that all worked out. All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Are there any other motions, discussion on this matter? I mean, I don't know if, speaking for myself, Commissioner Jackson, I don't know if there's anything we need to do. I mean, we've read the minutes. They comply with the law that we have to live with. I see no reason not to just go ahead and get the minutes done. Now, if there is a problem, Mr. Lambert does find a problem at a later date, we can come back to visit these minutes then, and we can leave that open. Mr. Lambert?
I can appreciate you don't see a problem with changing from the motion that was passed, but I really just think that we should have agendized rescinding the earlier motion. And if you want to continue outside of the rules of the motions, go right ahead. I'll abstain. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments? I'll go ahead and close this item. All right. So item number 5 has been passed on to our next meeting. All right. Agenda item number 6. This is an agenda item brought by Mr. Lambert. Mr. Lambert would like to discuss the use of title in an ethics inquiry made by myself, Paul Jackson, on February the 15th.
Mr. Jackson.
I'm sorry, sir.
Excuse me, Mr. Jackson. I know you do, but you're fairly aware that you've changed the agenda item drastically and that I've asked for the agenda item to be removed and that to have changed my agenda item is a blatant disrespect for process.
Hold on a second, sir. All right. I had sent you an email asking you that very question, and you did not respond. Did I not?
You sent me an email stating that that agenda item was okay and that there was a problem with an agenda item that is not in here about economic impact. The fact is, this is not my agenda item. I am withdrawing it, and I object most strenuously to it having been changed and monkeyed with. These are shenanigans that are inappropriate in this or any community in governance.
Mr. Lambert, If you would like to restate your agenda item, and I object to the characterization of monkeyed with or any other derogatory characterization. It is simply said. The only thing I added was a couple of, well, actually, there's nothing added here. So if you would like to, restate your motion, if you would like to make a motion, I'll be happy to hear it.
I wanted it agendized, and there was no item C on it, and I've withdrawn the motion with
All
a
right,
statement.
so the
End of
motion is,
story.
again, the motion has been removed. All right. That's number 6. Item number 7, additional phone lines. Kim, you had somebody come in for that, or did they send you a letter?
I've been in discussion with the purchasing department for the state. I have a what they refer to as a tag put in for request, what will basically issue us a state phone number, which will allow us then to go to a major phone carrier. The state usually uses AT&T to obtain state rates for getting that conference line put in. AT&T will not communicate with me until I have that state-issued phone number for the commission.
Okay, is there a cost?
Yes, there will be a cost.
Do we know what the cost is?
We do not have the cost. That I'm waiting for. The lady I was in communication with thought that she could give me the cost, but we had to go through and I had to issue a ticket, and I'm waiting for that back from her.
Okay, thank you. Has anybody else got any questions of Ms. Miller?
It's Commissioner Elmore.
Go ahead, sir.
Will this phone line allow commissioners to call in and attend from remote locations, such as Sheriff Lee could call in from his office as opposed to driving 5 hours to Las Vegas?
Yes, anybody can call in.
Fantastic.
So it would be issuing the commission a state phone number, and then from that point, we could get a conference call line with AT&T or a major carrier.
Perfect. Thank you.
Commissioner Richardson. And the reason that this is because we do not have a dedicated office or a phone number for the commission. And for us to have the opportunity to have a call-in number through AT&T or whoever the carrier is we had to apply through the IT office, the governor's office, to be able to apply for this phone number separate from an office that we had to get before she's able to even negotiate a cost.
Okay, Ms. Lambert?
Thank you. When you talked to them, they didn't make any mention of you having to pay for operators to do conference calling, did they?
No.
Okay.
It's just like a general conference line. In talking with the Jen at LCB, she would call into the conference call line about 10 minutes before our meeting would start, and then that would then initiate the conference call line, very similar to how Commissioner Lee calls in. It would just be a live open line during our meetings.
I understand. I would like to make a motion to move forward at authorizing you to acquire a business line with a cap to initiate that line at $300, because I believe it's only going to cost $100 to begin having an OHV line open. So we have a motion on the floor.
Do we have a second?
Richardson, second.
I just
John
wondered
Griggs, second.
Okay.
if we
All
have
right.
the money in the budget.
We had 2 seconds. Mr. Griggs, Mr. Richardson sort of beat you to the punch on that. Ms. Baker, you have a comment, discussion?
I do. I love the idea, and I think we want to go forward with it. And I just want to make sure that I'm not sure that we have the money allocated in our budget for it, so I just want to make sure that, financially it's something we can support, or do we need to have a initial item to modify the budget first before we would support the motion to expend the money? I just need that answered first.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? Did I hear somebody?
John Griggs.
Yes, go ahead, Ms. Griggs.
will there be a monthly fee associated with this? And Mr. Lambert, would you like to amend your motion to include that if that's the case?
Yes, sir, there is a monthly fee. It's my understanding that this is cheaper than a standard AT&T line. So the motion would be something as follows. I make a motion to authorize the secretary to acquire an AT&T line through the state of Nevada with a $300 initiation cap and the standard monthly fees so that the public can be more involved. Thank you.
All right, you accept that amendment, Mr. Griggs? I'm sorry, Mr. Richardson was the second.
Just so it's aware that it's for the commissioners and the public as well.
Right. So you're accepting that?
Yes.
Right. As we stand right now, the way we've been doing in the past, the first line was free. So we had a commissioner call in. If somebody called in after that, there was an expense, and I think it was $1 something per minute. Are we going to be subject to those charges as well?
I can answer it for...
Go ahead.
To my understanding, it's a general conference call line, so we pay for time.
We pay for time on the conference line.
It depends on which carrier you're using.
Okay. What I would, and again, my feeling on this, and I'll let you go in a second, sir. My feeling on this is this may not be ripe for a decision by the commission in that we need to know how much it's going to cost, and then once we know how much it's going to cost and what everything's going to be or what our options are, then we could vote on it. But that's my opinion. Mr. Cox, you had a question?
Well, that's my opinion as well. I don't see how we can authorize her to get something we don't know what the final outcome is going to be. I would have a very hard time voting to approve that, looking at the budget. You know, if it's going to cost so much a minute for however many people would call in during a public meeting for a 3-hour meeting, I don't see how we can just authorize her to go out and acquire it. We need to know the exact cost, in my mind.
All right, Mr. Lambert, you've been patient.
I have researched the cost, and if we do not have a public line, it was well over $1 a minute. As a public line, it falls under 5 cents a minute. I believe the number was like 2.3 cents a minute. But I would suggest that we authorize as much as $100 a month to include the public. That's far cheaper than if we begin to pay mileage for commissioners to travel, and we need some transparency. We desperately need more transparency. This should be capped at $100 a month for the phone bill, and I can amend my amendment if you would like.
Commissioner Jackson.
Yes, sir.
Chairman Jackson.
Go ahead, sir.
Hey, I don't know. I don't want to throw a whole wrench into this, and I don't know whether it is it's viable for the commission. But at the sheriff's office, we subscribe to GoToMeeting. I think it's $300 a year per year, and I understand we might need more lines in this, but I think it gives you up to 30 lines to call into. It issues you the call number. You can actually be interactive over the computer. I don't know if we can subscribe to maybe something that's the same type of deal. You schedule a meeting, it ships out that meeting, that call number and the code to everybody that wants to participate. They call into the phone number, they put in their code, and like I said, they can even participate over the computer if there's things that need to be shown. I don't know whether something like that would work also.
Okay, thank you, sir. Is there any other comments?
Can I?
Yes.
We cannot use GoToMeeting.
It doesn't work.
Per the LCB, it has to be a conference call line through a major carrier, and that's it.
Okay.
Okay.
Ms. Baker, did you have a comment?
This is Commissioner Cox.
Oh, go ahead. That was it.
No, Mr. We have a line item in the budget for room and equipment rentals for the public of $1,000. And we have a line item in the budget for travel and meetings for commissioners for $5,000. So those, I think at least in the room and equipment for the public, we have $1,000 in our budget.
I'm going to, unless there's any more comment, I'm going to ask Mr. Lambert to restate the motion, then we can go to the vote. unless anybody's got any
First, I'm
objections.
going to clear up a couple items in regard to my research on this item. AT&T, if we use the AT&T carrier that the state uses, the phone lines will integrate with the video call, and we will have an accurate document of public record. So the AT&T notion is a very good notion. For our last attempt at this motion, we will start again and see if we can get another second. It would be a $300 cap to initiate the phone line, $100 a month to maintain the phone line, and the phone line would be available to the public and to the commission. It does not require operators. It's a straightforward technology. That's my motion.
All right, are you seconding that, Mr. Richardson?
Richardson, second.
All right, we're going to move to the vote. All in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Okay, it's, any nays? Any abstentions? Motion passes. All right. All right, item number 8. Yes. As I've been reminded, the Commissioner Giroux is now attending the meeting, so please mark him present. Item number 8, payment for commission meetings. This is an item that was brought up by one of our commissioners in reference to being paid. And again, if I'm wrong on this, I stand to be corrected, but I believe that the statute allows commissioners to be paid $150 per meeting and reasonable expenses. I'm going to open this up for discussion. At the time I was asked about being paid, I didn't think the situation was right, because we've never really taken on this matter as a commission. I know we've had some discussions on it, but we've never really had a motion on whether or not the commissioners can or should take advantage of the payment. So I'm going to open this for discussion. Mr. Hastings?
Deputy AG Nathan Hastings, in looking over the agenda prior to the meeting, I did look into this a little bit. Maybe you can point me to where the $150 per meeting that you referenced is. But what I've found in the statute providing for the commission is that, excuse me, at NRS 490.067, sub 7, sub A, it says that each member of the commission is entitled to receive, if money is available for that purpose pursuant to the fees collected under the fee statute, the per diem allowance and travel expenses provided for state officers and employees generally. So my opinion as to this matter, having looked at the statute, and unless there is an additional statute that I have not been able to find that you might reference in terms of a specific dollar amount, that a per diem allowance and travel expenses, where travel is implicated, is provided for by the statute, but a flat rate for just attending the meeting, if per diem and travel are not implicated, is not something that I see, and it's something that I'm aware of. So that's what I've seen. And under that, there would be no need for this commission to take any action. There would be no need for an action item of the commission to make a motion and take an action to approve this. It's provided for by statute, and the recovery of per diem and travel is something that can be done internally through administrative process that would not require action in a public meeting, to just determine how commissioners would submit for expenses for per diem and travel. That's done by all state agencies and offices, just as a matter of course.
All right. Do we have any further discussion on the matter? I'm assuming there's not going to be a motion, given Mr. Hastings' comments, but Mr. Lambert?
Mr. Hastings, you'll find the $150 mentioned under boards and commissions in the contract that was issued along with the other oaths. It also allows there's a limitation on travel there, that you cannot bill travel if under 30 miles. So just so you know.
Correct.
That
So
limitation is in the other documents, but.
So, right, in other words, when I said that if per diem and travel are implicated, then those costs would be provided for. So in other words, and I'm not specific or familiar with all the details, but in other words, if under 30 miles, then it's not implicated, if that's what it is.
It's just trying to give you the pieces of information.
Sure. So it's,
Thank you.
Can you tell me again what the document is that?
Under oaths and commissions.
Mr. Lambert, for the record.
Mr. Lambert, for the record, under oaths and commissions, I can probably find it and email it to you.
Under oaths and commissions in what document?
It's on the governor's website. I'll look to find you the document.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Anybody else? Comments? Discussion?
This is Commissioner Elmore. Should
Go ahead, sir.
we ask that this agenda item be put on the next agenda to be revisited?
Well, not really. Given Paul Jackson for the record, not really. Given Mr. Hastings' comments, we really, yeah, it's already something that if a commissioner feels that they are due this amount of money, then we should go ahead and do it. The only thing that I would say is that under the statute it says when monies are available. So the only question that we would have, and the only question that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Hastings, but the only question that we as a commission could vote on is whether we believe the monies are available or there are monies in the budget to do it.
This is Commissioner Elmore. It's just the reason that I asked that question is that there seems to be some question by Mr. Lambert as to whether or not there's a set fee. And so if documentation can be provided to Mr. Hastings and we can revisit this, we get some final resolution here in the meeting in a public format, which I believe is what Mr. Lambert is looking for. So once again, do we need to revisit this on the next agenda?
So Nathan Hastings, for the record, I would think that if that $150 is expressly provided for, or any other amount for a per meeting amount that commissioners are entitled to, the same rationale that I expressed about per diem and travel expenses being something that can be taken up administratively as a matter of course would apply. And therefore, internally, it can be determined whether and if that amount, in fact is, and I'm not doubting what Commissioner Lambert said or anything else, is an entitlement just like per diem and travel expenses, and I don't think that action would need to be taken at a meeting to approve it. On Chairman Jackson's point about determining what's in the budget, it sounds like was it Cox already stated what certain amounts that were budgeted and a certain amount that appeared to be on the budget for payment for those types of expenses. So I don't know that would necessarily need to be brought up again either.
This is Paul Jackson for the record. Mr. Hastings, so you're saying that we don't need to decide as a group whether there is monies available?
All I said is that it sounded like Commissioner Cox had already stated that amount had been budgeted. I'm assuming that means and implies that took place by means of an action of the commission at a previous meeting in determining that amount was budgeted for that. It sounds like what your question is does the commission need to take that up again? And it sounds to me like it already took place.
Okay, gentlemen, any other comments, any motions, anything else by anybody?
This is Commissioner Richardson.
Okay, go ahead.
All I would ask is if those types of expenditures are done, the commission somehow has visibility, after the fact's fine. If we just have the option to review during the annual treasurer's report that Commissioner A submitted a voucher of some sort, and then it gets briefed as an agendized item on the subsequent commission meeting.
Mr. Griggs? I'm sorry.
I would just, John Griggs. I would say, seeing that it's coming from the same budget, that we make sure we pay our secretaries before anybody else gets paid.
You had a question?
Yes, Commissioner McKay, for the record, maybe Charlie can make it clear what our present budget allows for and if there is money to do both.
Before Mr. Cox answers, I'd sort of bring up on, do we want to approve, as a matter of course, do we want to approve these expenditures at a commission meeting? Or do we want to, it gives us more visibility to the public.
They're already approved.
But, you know, but what I'm saying is it gives the public a little bit more clarity because then it's on the record and they see it.
I believe that there's been statements on the record.
Yeah, but I'm asking the question. I mean, does everybody believe we need to bring it up as a vote, or do we need to approve it each time it's done, or not? Go ahead, Ms. Lambert.
This discussion should be in minutes from perhaps 2 years ago, and the criteria that I believe was voted upon at that time was that one would submit to the chair, and the chair would review it with the treasurer, and said check would be written. I believe that if we dig back, this was done at the library at the first or second meeting there, an early budget meeting, but there was already a motion and a protocol put in place.
If there's no other comment on this, we can move ahead. All right. I'm going to skip regulation report for a second and move it further back down to the agenda. Same with item number 10. I'm going to quickly go through reports. DMV report. Ladies, there is no motion.
Good morning. Doreen Rigsby, for the record, from the Department of Motor Vehicles. Today's report, I brought the full registrations last noted on May 27th were 40,629. We had 9,184 renewal decals and 275 duplicate decals. This brings to the total registration count to 50,088. As of May 27th, a total of 14,330 titles were issued. The last report of funds to the commission was as of May 15th. The total was 573,410. The last deposit was May 8th, which that total was 23,885. We're at a 2-day turnaround right now. We expect that to stay that way through July due to that deadline that we had last year. So we have been referring a lot of people to the website. We're seeing that they're probably about 70% customers are renewing on the web, so that helps out a lot. But any questions for me?
Do we have any questions? Anybody from commission? I'm not
Commissioner
seeing
Baker,
any. Go ahead. Go ahead, Ms. Baker.
I'm just curious, did anybody help us establish what we would guess are the number of vehicles out there? So like I heard her say the 50,088 vehicles are registered, and I'm just wondering what percentage that is of our best guess of what is out there, just to try to put it into perspective.
This is Commissioner Jacks for the record. The reality is there are no hard numbers as to exactly how many vehicles are out there. I've personally heard estimates from 250 to 400,000. 50,000 is clearly a small percentage of the number that we have there, and that's the best numbers that I've heard. Is anybody else got anything else, Mr. Lambert?
Nevada State Parks did a survey and a study back in 2003 that was issued in 2005, as data given at 95% confidence. That study indicated there were 425,000 OHVs in 2003. Having done some research on that, there were 3 years of over 25 and near 30% growth, and then there's been some backslide. It's my personal belief that the actual number is in the neighborhood of 500,000 to 600,000 vehicles today. It is unlikely that it has slid below 400,000. It appears that we have accomplished 10% compliance. So we're doing as well as might be expected, perhaps. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments, questions? Mr. Giroux? No? Okay. All right. We thank you very much, ma'am. I'm going to move now to the Treasurer's report. Mr. Cox.
All right. The current checkbook balance is $565,611. So if the DMV has only given us $573 and some dollars, I think we're doing pretty darn good. I don't know how that can really be because I know we spent more money than that, but that's our current checkbook balance, $565,611. The only outstanding bills we have to pay are secretary's hours, which I believe are on the agenda. The only other thing I might add, and we may need to consider as a commission, is that we are exceeding the amount of money that we're spending on a secretary based on what we put in the budget, and I don't know how to overcome that unless through audio and visual recordings we could not have the secretary attend some of the committee meetings, and there would have to be a secretary on that committee that would then get her the information to be typed up and sent out, would be the only suggestion that I would have.
Nathan Hastings, for the record, just to be clear, this is not an action item, and so while those ideas could theoretically be discussed, it'd need to be put on a future agenda for any decision to be made on something like that.
Okay, Mr. Cox, do you have anything else? All right, go ahead. Any questions for Mr. Cox?
This is Commissioner Elmore.
Go ahead, sir.
Commissioner Cox, would it be possible for the future agendas to be able to provide a supplement that shows the financials, current balance, any open expenses, just some sort of snapshot of the day?
Yes, I can do that.
That would be great. Thank you.
All right, anything else? Seeing nothing, we're going to move ahead. I'm going to move ahead to item number 16, election of chair, vice chair, secretary, and treasurer. All right, we've had the basic rules set out in the last meeting. Does anybody have any questions before we get started? All right. The first election is going to be for chair. I am not seeking re-election. Therefore, I think it's reasonable that I run this election since I'm the only one who's definitely not running. And I'm going to ask for nominations from the floor. Are there any nominations from the floor for chair? Don't all speak at once.
This is Commissioner Baker.
Go ahead, Commissioner Baker.
I'd like to make a motion to throw out
nomination,
the name of
ma'am.
Commissioner Cox for chair.
Okay.
Nomination of Commissioner Cox for chair.
All right. Thank you. Are there any other nominations?
Commissioner Richardson, I'd nominate Mr. Lambert for chair.
Okay. Mr. Lambert.
Are Commissioner Griggs or McKay willing to serve this post? Because I like their politeness.
Commissioner McKay, for the
John
record.
Griggs, thank you, Mr. Lambert.
Go ahead, John. You're more polite than
Thank
me.
you, Mr. Lambert. Not.
We couldn't hear you. Are you prepared to accept a nomination if you receive one?
I'm sorry. No, thank you. Not at this time. I think with the amount of work we have to get done and the distance I am from everybody else, just
I
makes
would like
it
to nominate
untenable.
Mr. McKay.
But thank you for your consideration.
I appreciate that. I'd like to nominate Mr. McKay at this point.
All right, thank you. Mr. McKay. All right. Are there any other nominations before I close nominations? Okay. As per our rules set forth, if a candidate does not reach 50%, then we go ahead and basically take the two who got the most votes and move them forward and have a second vote, a second round of voting. All right. Let's see. Madam Secretary, would you do a roll and ask? So each person will be asked who they're voting for. It'll be noted by the Secretary, and then she will tally the results at the end. So we'll go through this one person at a time. So, Ms. Miller, please.
Commissioner Cox,
I believe I'd vote for myself.
Commissioner Elmore,
Commissioner Cox,
Commissioner Baker,
Commissioner Cox.
Commissioner Giroux,
Commissioner McKay.
Commissioner Griggs,
I want to withdraw.
Let's finish the vote first. Go ahead, Mr. Griggs.
What was that? I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I said I wanted to withdraw.
We're in the middle of the vote, so Mr. Griggs, go ahead. We'll complete the vote.
Go ahead. Mr. Cox.
Commissioner Lambert,
Same. Oh, McKay, excuse me.
Commissioner Lee,
Commissioner McKay.
Commissioner Richardson,
Just to clarify, Mr. Lambert, you have withdrawn your name. Commissioner McKay.
and Commissioner McKay.
Can I get the tally so far between Charlie and myself?
It's 4 and 4.
I'll vote for myself.
That puts Commissioner McKay at 5, Commissioner Cox at 4.
All right, we have a winner, Mr. McKay. You are now the official president. With your permission, Mr. McKay, I'll go on and complete the election, and
Please
then
do.
we can go from there. All right, Vice Chair. Do I have any nominations for Vice Chair?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to nominate Mr. Cox for Vice Chair.
Mr. Cox has been nominated for Vice Chair. Are there any other nominations? Going once.
Would Mr. Griggs take that one? Doesn't take as much time.
I appreciate that. No, I think Mr. Cox would do a wonderful job.
All righty. Do we have any other nominations for Vice Chair? Cox has already been nominated. All right. Seeing no other nomination. Go ahead.
Mr. Richardson for Vice Chair, please.
All right. Mr. Richardson, will you accept the nomination?
Yes, sir.
All right. Any other? This is the last call for nominations for Vice Chair. All righty. Ms. Miller, if you can go ahead and take the roll. The two candidates are Mr. Cox and Mr. Richardson.
Commissioner Cox,
Myself.
Commissioner Elmore,
Commissioner Cox,
Commissioner Baker,
Commissioner Cox.
Commissioner Giroux,
Commissioner Cox.
Commissioner Griggs,
Commissioner Cox.
Commissioner Lambert,
Mr. Richardson.
Commissioner Lee,
Commissioner Cox.
Commissioner Richardson,
Myself.
Commissioner McKay.
Commissioner Cox.
That puts Commissioner Cox at 7, Commissioner Richardson at 2.
All right, thank you. We're going to go ahead with nominations for secretary. Do I have any nominations for secretary? Don't all jump on it.
John Griggs.
Go ahead, Mr. Griggs.
I nominate Mr. Richardson.
All right. All right. Are there any other nominations? Going once? Going twice? All right. I have closed nominations. Mr. Richardson, you are secretary by affirmation. All right. And last but not least, treasurer, which actually should have went before secretary, but we'll forgive ourselves for that. Treasurer, do I have nominations for treasurer? That's it.
Commissioner McKay, I'd like to nominate Commissioner Baker for treasurer.
Commissioner Baker, will you accept the nomination?
No, thank you.
No? All right. Are there any other nominations?
This is Commissioner Cox.
Sir.
I don't know if it's legal or appropriate, but since vice chair is not a very time-consuming job, I would continue to be treasurer if the commission so wanted.
Okay, sir. And I'm going to break protocol here. Has anybody got any comments? Would anybody on the commission object if Mr. Cox held two positions? I'm looking at shaking heads. And I'm going to defer for 1 second. Mr. Hastings is looking it up so we can... Anybody going to do good jokes while we're waiting? Yeah, okay.
This is Nathan Hastings. I don't see that the statute establishing the makeup of the commission addresses whether or not that can take place one way or the other. And I would say that unless someone has some insight to point me in another direction, that perhaps that could take place, and then if it became discovered that that was not proper, the commission could take an action to remedy it in the future.
All righty. So I'm going to, as my last decision as chair, I'm going to say that it's okay, unless somebody tells us differently, for Mr. Cox to be both treasurer and vice chair. Mr. Cox has done a good job as treasurer. So, again, are there any other nominees for treasurer?
This is Commissioner Elmore. I'm interested with Commissioner McKay entertain the idea of being our treasurer.
Treasurer and chairman?
He's already... Yeah,
I'm sorry.
He gives us the same dilemma.
Paul, Darren, would you consider being treasurer?
This is Commissioner Elmore. I would consider it, although given my personal business and my travel regimen, I just don't think that it makes sense.
Okay, Mr. Lambert?
I could see a possible conflict with either a president or vice president being the treasurer also, because there's a check and balance between the treasurer and the executive, and even the vice chair, if the chair is missing, it just leaves us in an inappropriate ground. I could see it being a secretary and the treasurer. I can't see it being the chair and the treasurer, and I cannot see it being the vice chair and the treasurer, because there's a check and balance that it takes both realms of the government to sign off a check.
Go ahead, Mr. Hastings.
Just to clarify my comments from earlier, this would be entirely a decision for the commission to make as to the prudence of doing that, as to the policy considerations of whether it wants to do that. I was only stating that my initial review of the statute did not indicate that you could not do that as a matter of law. That I just wanted to clarify that I'm not telling you one way or another whether you should do it. I just don't see a provision that specifically says that you cannot. It's a policy decision that you need to make.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Guys,
Mr. Chairman,
can't have private conversation. All right. I think Mr. Griggs was first. I apologize if he wasn't. Mr. Griggs?
Thank you. Mr. Lambert, would you entertain the nomination for treasurer?
As a last resort, I would. I'm curious as to whether Mr. Richardson, who I don't see as a conflict, would be willing to accept treasurer.
Okay. Just let me throw in one point before we go any further with this. If we do have a vice chair / treasurer, that person can only sign as one. So it would then, and it's my understanding, it would fall to the secretary to co-sign checks as opposed to the vice chair. So we would be able to get around that legally. I mean, Ms. Lambert brings up a good point, but we would be able to do that because then if the vice chair is not available to sign checks because he has now become the chair de facto, then the secretary would be the person to do the checks. So we would have a check and balance there. All right, we do need to move along. So
I was asked if I would do it, and as the last resort,
okay.
I will.
Okay, so Mr. Lambert, you are willing to accept the nomination?
Yes, if I'm nominated, I will do it.
All right. So Mr. Richardson has nominated Mr. Lambert. I thought it was you. Who was
Sounded like you did.
Yeah. Who was it? Was it Mr. Griggs?
No, it was Mr. Richardson.
Yes, it was me.
It was okay.
Mr. Griggs.
Right. Okay. All right. Are there any other nominations?
I'd like to nominate Commissioner Cox.
Mr. Cox has already been nominated, sir. Okay. All right. So just to clarify, our two nominees for office of treasurer are Mr. Cox and Mr. Lambert. Are there any other nominations from the floor? I'm closing the nominations. Okay. Nominations are closed. All right. Let's take our vote. Ms. Miller?
Commissioner Cox?
Yes, I'd be happy to continue doing it.
Commissioner Elmore?
Commissioner Lambert?
Commissioner Baker?
Commissioner Cox.
Commissioner Giroux?
Commissioner Cox.
Commissioner Griggs?
Commissioner Lambert.
Commissioner Lambert? Commissioner Lee?
Commissioner Cox.
Commissioner Richardson?
Commissioner Lambert.
Commissioner McKay?
Commissioner Lambert.
Hang on a second. We've got a little issue here. Mr. McKay, sugar, yeah, because you're really the chair, so you can't. Well, I'm acting chair, so I'm acting chair. So at this point, Mr. McKay can vote unless there's any objections to that. I just don't want this to come up later. Anybody object to that? All right. Okay. Go ahead, Ms. Miller.
So that gives us Commissioner Cox 4 and Commissioner Lambert 5.
All right, we have our winners. All right, I am now going to hand over the gavel, as it were, to Mr. McKay.
Or you want to close
No,
the AJ?
no, you've got to be close to the AJ. Let's follow protocol. In leaving, I would like to thank the Commission and the members of the public for their support. It has been a tempestuous 2 years, but I'm glad I did it. And again, I thank you all for those that supported me and those that didn't, because as is your right, you don't have to. But anyways, thank you again, folks, and I will hand over to Mr. McKay. In fact, I'll tell you what, why don't we take a 2-minute recess, and then we can get some things handed over. All right, we're now in recess for 2 minutes.
I don't have the familiarity with the state rigmarole. No, I just don't have the knowledge base. There's red tape involved.
Holy smokes, that's a new notion.
Yeah, no employees, it's one man.
Really, you know I'm getting old and more lengthy every day.
Even some of the things that we do.
I noticed that it has
The sentences were
power steering.
complete sentences.
Yeah, no, because
Yes, they are, right. So
that's because the actual legal language will come from the legislature council bureau. So yeah, I do understand on that one, but yeah, that's.
Go ahead, Mr. Griggs.
Thank you. I move we approve this document for discussion.
All right, it's been moved by Commissioner Griggs. Do we have a second?
Commissioner Elmore, I'll second.
Okay, Commissioner Elmore has seconded. Discussion, further discussion?
This is Commissioner Baker, and I just want one clarification. When we were, as an example of the grants that we had before us before, where we were putting in the terms like you had to purchase the vehicle within the state of Nevada, we had a couple of other terms. Would we put those in this grant agreement, or is there a separate thing that includes the specific terms we wanted to condition on the grants? I just need to understand that part.
Commissioner Baker, this is Chairman McKay for the record. I believe it was intended that those stipulations would go in the grant guidebook.
Well, this is Commissioner Baker. Let's say, as an example, the Connex box that we were going to approve to house things, and we wanted to put the term in there that they let us put a banner on the outside for marketing. So clearly that wouldn't be covered in the guidelines, and so, and there was another one where we wanted to make sure the budget, well, I guess we would negotiate the budget separate, with like not paying the volunteers, but the banner is a perfect example. How would we work the terms of that deal that we wanted to include as part of the award?
Okay.
This is Commissioner Cox.
Go ahead, Charlie.
I would address your attention to, under scope of work, the second sentence. The sponsor will agree to any and all stipulations in addition to the scope of work described in the grant application that the commission has placed upon the project. Does that help?
I do, and I think would we actually include those stipulations within the agreement then, or how would they be memorialized to tie to it?
Go ahead, Charlie.
I believe we would have to outline them within the agreement.
This is Commissioner
Could be
Elmore.
a separate document.
This is Commissioner Elmore. Could we, yes, a simple separate document. Could we attach an addendum and just note the potential addendum in under the scope of work or the stipulations?
Go ahead.
This is Commissioner Baker, and I'm just thinking, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if just right underneath the scope of work, we have a fill in the blank, if there were any, and embed it right in here. I'm good either way, as long as we have a process that ties those to the agreement.
Commissioner Lambert?
Would you entertain a motion at this point, Chairman?
I'm sorry. This is Nathan Hastings for the record with the Attorney General's office. The item number 9 that is before the Commission at this time from the agenda is for the Commission to discuss the proposed recommendations from the Regulation Committee, and possible action is indicated to include accepting the recommendations from the committee to be processed and forwarded to rulemaking, to regulations. For open meeting law purposes, the matter has not been agendized for purposes of notice to the public that there would be further amendments, for example, to this grant agreement at this meeting, action taken by the Commission. So I don't think that can happen.
Commissioner Lambert?
I find myself in an uncomfortable position. I had favored putting a stipulation in the scope of work, as Commissioner Baker favored, so that we could move forward. But due to the agendizing of this item, my motion would be to accept this agreement as stands and add that item into the scope of work at this point.
Point of order, Mr. Lambert. There is already a motion on the floor which has been seconded, and that motion was to approve the document as done. So there is no need to add a second motion. In fact, you can't do that.
Okay. Any further discussion, or should we put it to a vote?
John Griggs.
Go ahead, Mr. Griggs.
I'd like to amend my motion. I'm not sure how to do that to stay within the open meeting law.
Mr. Griggs.
Mr. Lambert, could you help me with that, please?
I will surely try. Mr. Jackson was offering to help at the same time. I believe that what we're going to have to do is accept this agreement today so that we can move forward. We will write it into the guidebook in the future, and then we will re-agendize this perhaps if the Commission feels to. But I think you just want to vote to approve this, since it's the only thing we're allowed to do, John. Thank you.
Thank you. I withdraw my thank you. I withdraw my amendment.
Okay. So basically, according to how it's published in our agenda, we either accept the recommendations from the committee and forward it to the LCB to draft language, and then we can schedule public workshops later. So we do have a motion to approve this and a second. Can I call for the vote?
Can I make a comment, please?
Go ahead, Mr.
Paul
Jackson.
Jackson, for the record. If we want to make substantial changes to this, the only way we could really do that is to send it back to committee. And since we have a new chair, the new chair privilege is to reappoint or appoint new people to the committee. And my suggestion would be that if we take this document, refer it back to committee, and then allow all of the commissioners to submit written suggestions on this, and then we can take that back to committee. The committee. Well, because clearly there's some people who have some extra input on this. We can approve it and just go straight ahead. There's a motion on the floor to approve it. I'm just saying if we don't approve it, then what can be done is you can go back to committee, and those people who wish to make suggestions can, or the chair can appoint them to the committee. Thank you.
This is Commissioner Richardson. Somewhere in the process, will the commission have the ability to stipulate what we want to see at the end of this process for each individual grant? And that's probably a question for the Regulation Committee more than the chair.
Chair, Mr. Jackson. Mr. Jackson, we do have a public workshop, so there are, in answer to your question, there are changes can be made at the public workshop, because then it would be resubmitted to LCB again. So yes, there is an opportunity to change it.
This is Mr. Cox.
Go ahead, Charlie.
When we get the documents back from LCB, the commission can accept or reject what LCB gives us back even before we have the public workshop. And there will be several opportunities in the future to modify these documents.
But if we change them, does it have to go back?
If we change them, it has to go back to LCB again. But that's, I mean, it's just the way the process works. But it is not until we finally accept everything and make it known that this is the final document that we're accepting, that up until that point we can change whatever we need to. It just goes back and forth to LBC. Every time we make a change, it has to go back to LCB. Well, as stated earlier, we can have a separate document in the guidebook. These regulations only are something we can fall back on as whatever we put in the guidebook, we can fall back on this. And this statement clearly says that whatever we would place upon the project, the grantee accepts. So if we put that in the guidebook or as a separate document, we can deal with it at a separate time.
Very well. That being said, do we want to vote on the original motion, knowing that it can be changed after review by LCB or our public workshop, or additional documents that we can put in the grant guidebook?
Commissioner Baker, and I have a question.
Go ahead, Commissioner Baker.
Thank you. And I apologize if this was stated before and I didn't catch it, but more so to the regulations that we're going to talk about next underneath this same agenda item. I thought I misunderstood the process, because I thought today was the day for us to provide our feedback on them if we didn't sit in the committee. And so now I just want clarification. Was it the intention always for the Regulation Committee to put something together, get the feedback of the Legislative Counsel Bureau, then take it to the public, as well as get the other commissioners' feedback, then take it back to the LCB and then approve it? Or would we want to get the commission, other commissioners' input and the public input, and then go back to the LCB? I'm okay forwarding this on as long as we still have a process to allow us to comment. But if we're wasting the LCB's time, then I'm just questioning what the thought process was for that.
Commissioner Jackson, for the record.
Go ahead.
I think Commissioner Baker makes a good point, that if we approve this as is and go forward and it goes to LCB and then goes to the public workshop and then gets changed and has to go back to LCB again, that makes the system a little bit more clumsy. It may be better for us to have a second meeting of the Regulation Committee, maybe a new committee, because again, the chair can select who's on that committee, and that can be done in the next couple of weeks, well before our next meeting, and then it can be approved, and is going to be closer to what we really want it to be.
John Griggs.
Go ahead, Commissioner Briggs. Great.
I think it's going to look quite a bit different when it comes back from LCB, both of these documents. I just think that's the way it works, and I think we're going to want to tune it up again after that. So I'm inclined to say let's approve it as it is now and hammer it again, either at the public workshop or another special meeting.
All right.
So Nathan Hastings, for the record. The way the process is set up, it intends that the commission would take into account what the public says at the workshop, and then there's also a public comment hearing. In other words, I think the concern of having to change it again once the public has had the workshop and comment hearing as an inefficiency or some kind of problematic thing is not in line with the intent of the regulatory statute that lays out those hearings' existence. In other words, it's intended that there could be things that would come up at those hearings that would inspire perhaps some changes or alterations or amendments or tweaks. So there's no problem, big picture, with the motion in that sense, because there could or would perhaps be some changes anyway. And to the extent that the commission is saying, hey, we want to beef up this section about a stipulation, that can take place. So there's no problems.
All right. Being that we just heard legal counsel's input, that there will be plenty of opportunities for more input from the public and the commission, and those changes will be incorporated into the normal process. Can we go ahead and move forward on a vote?
Yay. Call for a vote.
You got to call for the vote.
I'll call for the vote.
Right. So what, you can start with all in favor.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Opposed?
Very good. Thank you. Motion carries.
Okay, so then the second document that we have before us are the grant regulations. And in light of what was said by the Attorney General, I don't know if there was a typo on page 1, line item 9. It simply ends, in the case of a commissioner will not vote. I thought it should go on to say on that particular grant, as does the line below it. Line 9 says if a commissioner or advisor is a member or volunteer, constructive member or volunteer of any entity seeking a grant or other consideration, they will declare such at the beginning of the meeting or the agenda item, and said entity may be discussed. The commissioner or advisor may speak in opposition or support of the grant consideration, but in the case of a commissioner will not vote. That's pretty open-ended, as it does states below. It should be on that particular grant, and I know we all assume that. Like I said, I don't know if that's a typo or what that is. But with that being said, I would recommend that we would forward these regulations on to LCB.
All right. Any discussion?
Commissioner Baker.
Go ahead, Commissioner Baker.
Thank you. Again, I guess if we want to move them forward to get the LCB feedback before the rest of the commissioners even get to provide any feedback, that's what we're going to do. I don't like it that none of my feedback gets to count. In particular, in this item number 9, I believe that actual statement is in direct violation of the state statute, because if you declare and abstain, you are not allowed to advocate. That's state law. And so we're saying you can abstain and advocate, which is in direct violation. So I don't even think we should be putting that in the rules, but I'm guessing the LCB will find that as a glaring error and reject it anyway. So maybe it doesn't matter. The other comments I wanted to make.
Go ahead, continue.
Just a couple issues.
The only other thing I wanted.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Baker.
Comment.
Go ahead.
The other thing is state statute for our commission says that we shall shall, not may, but shall solicit 9 non-voting advisors to the commission to serve the 2-year terms with the whole intent of them giving us feedback on the grant process. So I think our grant regulations should include the process where we solicit those 9 non-voting advisors. My other thought was, as I understand it, before I got on the commission, this was an attempt made and none of the departments that are listed, BLM, U.S. Forest Service, Department of Wildlife, Commission on Tourism, Fish and Wildlife, nobody wanted to participate. And I didn't know if we wanted to consider excluding award of a grant to any of the agencies that failed to participate. But I think that we for sure have to include some type of process to solicit them, because that's a mandate of NRS. But again, maybe the LCB, I don't know what they'll do. Will they read through the statute for creation of the OHV and see that we don't comply in our regulations with some of them and embed them in there, or it will just catch it at the back end? That's my comment.
Thank you, Commissioner Baker. Commissioner Lambert.
Hello, Commissioner Baker. Commissioner Lambert, for the record. We do have advisors, and they've been available to us at all times. And a matter of fact, Leo Drum's here. I've reached out to them many times. They're available, and they've been appointed. I believe that we have an advisor reopening and a commission opening under science that is in the past. And we have a person that I know that has the degrees in systems and is applying. So there are advisors appointed. There's only one seat open, I believe, Sue.
John Griggs.
Go ahead, Commissioner Griggs.
I think Commissioner Baker's point's well made, in that I look forward to the full commission providing input on this as well. I'd like to see it agendized as such that at some point after LCB we can tweak this thing again.
Commissioner Jackson, for the record. I would make the point that we may want to just send this back to committee. It can be done in a couple of weeks, well before our next meeting. And then, all of the things that we'd like to be put in there can be put in there. There were a couple of things taken out of these regulations, which I was not real thrilled about. And I would like to have the whole commission take a look at it. And I think the commission may agree and put them back in. So again, I would like to see this go back to committee with the recommendations and any other suggestions from the commission and even members of the public. I mean, now that members of the public have seen it, maybe they want to address it by sending emails to the committee, and those suggestions can be considered as well at the committee level. Thank you.
Nathan Hastings, for the record. Perhaps enlighten me, Commissioner Jackson. It seems like what would have been ideal here would have been that this agenda item would have allowed for further discussion and potential amendment of a few of these items before and along with a vote to send it to the LCB, as opposed to just sending it to the LCB. In contrast to perhaps sending it back to the committee, wouldn't it be sufficient to perhaps perhaps to be a motion to not send it to the LCB at this time, but just have it re-agendized more fully for the next commission meeting, the full commission? It sounds like what Commissioner Baker and others have mentioned is that they'd like to be able to give their input. The committee has already done what it needs to do, and what would have been best perhaps would have been that the commission could have taken up what the committee had done today and then take that a little bit further. And it might not have to go back to the committee again, but just be re-agendized to allow the full commission to do what Commissioner Baker is mentioning.
Again, I wouldn't agree. I would not disagree with that. But our next commission meeting is in 2 months. and I was just hoping to shortcut the process a little bit, but I would have absolutely no problem with it being re-agendized and brought back.
Well, I ask, what's the pleasure of the board? Do they want to re-agendize this for further discussion and amendments in our next meeting?
I'll make a motion.
This is Commissioner Richardson, real quick. I just want to make sure I clarify something. The commission has already had the opportunity through the Regulations Committee to input on this, both those documents. It was solicited by the Regulation Committee within the last 2 months. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Regulation Committee, Mr. Cox, whoever's doing that. But it was already done. The commission as a whole was solicited through email and voice to make input to what we're doing right now.
True.
So what did I miss?
That's true. There were some things, actions taken by the committee that I personally didn't agree with, and I don't think the majority of the commissioners would agree with. So, and since it's the whole commission that has to approve it, that's kind of where I'm at. And I understand that you're frustrated with the process. I would make a motion that this item be re-agendized for the July meeting, and at that time be agendized in such a manner that suggestions, language can be added or taken away by the commission to produce a final product which will go to LCB.
Could we have a special meeting to speed up the process?
I would have no problem with that. That would be up to the chair.
Do we have a second for that motion?
Commissioner Joe, I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Further discussion?
John Griggs.
Go ahead, Commissioner Griggs.
Does anybody know how long the LCB process takes?
The closer we get to the legislature meeting, the longer it's going to take.
The LCB has 30 days.
That's all.
That's Commissioner Lambert, for the record. It's my understanding that the LCB will not entertain our documents during legislation, and that the window is short, and that it does make sense to me in particular to take what we have through LCB, bring it back to the public workshops, let the public vote, bring it back to the entire commission. There is a protocol in place. There was very, very strong support from the public in regard to the regulations, in particular the issue that the former chair didn't like. The public totally supported. So I would suggest that we had all been given the chance to go to the regulations meetings and to set in on them, and what we didn't get a chance to was to do it telephonically so it was convenient. But myself, I would vote to send these to LCB before the legislation starts, get their rewrite back so that we don't waste months more. At the point we have their rewrites, we'll have a better understanding of the legal implications of what have been done. Then we can go to public hearing, we can put public comment in it, and it of course goes to the entire commission to vote. But it seems like we're backtracking a little bit if we don't move this forward for all of the public that attended regulation meetings. The commission was all entitled to be there. Mr. Jackson chose to attend those meetings. Although he was not able to vote, the motions that he's talking about, I believe, all carried unanimously. So I would suggest that from my point of view, we have a vote and then we have another motion and we send these to LCB. Thank you.
Paul Jackson for the record. Again, I don't know what part that Mr. Lambert's referring to and what part was supposedly a unanimous vote, because there were several issues. And again, I'm not going to go into them at this point because I think this is not the forum at this point. We could move this along pretty quickly with the agreement of the chair. We could have a special meeting within 2 weeks. It could be attended. It could be a telephone meeting. But basically, that would allow us to get it right first time, as opposed to sending it to LCB, reworking the document, and maybe structurally changing the document completely, and then sending it back, which would even take longer. So I think it's better for us to send a document that's as close as possible to what we feel the final document should be. And as I said, it takes us an extra 2 weeks. which may save us a couple of months on the other end. Thank you.
Just one item.
John Griggs.
I'm sorry. So Nathan Hastings, for just one item that I think should probably be clarified before a vote would be taken, just so that everybody would be fully informed of perhaps what action could or would be taken. On item number 9, the reading of that last sentence reflects a typographical error, an unintentional way that it was put down, which I believe could be corrected administratively now to allow the commission to take an accurate vote. In other words, when it says on the last sentence of item number 9 of the proposed grant regulations that the commissioner or advisor may speak in opposition or support of the grant or consideration, but in the case of a commissioner will not vote. I mean, that sentence just doesn't make sense. I don't believe that was what was intended to be typed. Perhaps what was intended to be typed, and I'm just saying this hypothetically, was something along the lines of, but in that case, that commissioner will not vote, or something along those lines. It makes it a complete and proper sentence that seems to reflect what was intended by, I was at the meeting, my point being, the commission can take the action administratively in terms of the secretary and whoever else was involved with putting this together to say, and again, I just offered that as a hypothetical, but that's what it says. And then that can be put to vote to be put forward to the LCB, assuming there was a motion for that. And then at least what was being put forth at this time is what was intended to be put on paper, and then that addresses that small issue of giving the LCB something that's clearly not right. That can be corrected right now. There doesn't need to be a vote on it or anything like that. In other words, it's been agendized such that the commission can't vote to make it say that if that's not what was intended to say, but administratively the typo can be corrected.
Chair, this is Paul Jackson. Can we go ahead and vote on the motion that's on the table, and then we can move forward?
I have discussion.
A little more discussion? Go ahead, Mr. Griggs.
Discussion too, yes.
So the motion we're about to vote on is to not forward it to LCB and send it to the commission. The other school of thought presented is to continue with the process and work on it again at the public workshop. To me, both of those ideas can merge in that we can send it now to LCB, continue with the process, and at the public workshop, we agendize it as such that the commission can make changes that they see fit. Part of the process is that it will have to go back to LCB again after the public workshop. So to me, it makes sense to not pass the current motion, make a new motion that we approve it now to send to LCB and agendize it as such that we can work on it again during the public workshop.
It can be, this is Nathan Hastings again, the commissioners can participate and comment at a public workshop hearing, but couldn't necessarily take action to make amendments at that time. But the big picture of what you're saying strategically is accurate, that you could utilize that as an opportunity for the commissioners to discuss further the details of what those proposed changes would be.
Thank you. Commissioner Lee, go ahead.
I would just say that I agree with Commissioner Griggs and Lambert. I think we need to get it started and get it sent into the LCB. There's going to be changes anyway when we go to the public workshop, so let's just get it started. So I would be opposed to the current motion.
Okay. Any further discussion before we put Mr. Jackson's? Oh, go ahead, Darren.
This is Commissioner Elmore. We have to get this right. And if it takes another 2 months, if it takes another 4 months, we've spent 2 years trying to get a grant process established. And at this point, I'm less concerned about how long it takes as opposed to getting it right and getting it done so we can move forward and start awarding money that people have paid years before for their OHVs. And we got to get it right. So how long it takes at this point, I think we have to be mindful of it, but the end goal is to get it right. And we're in this situation because of a lack of hand-holding, I'll call it. The statute is somewhat vague. We're kind of our own bus driving down the road. We have some guidance, but yet we don't have guidance in other areas. So I would ask, and maybe Mr. Hastings can provide, I mean, what the best course of action is to get this right and yet further it along. We seem to be just spinning our wheels, and at the end of the day, we have to get this right to move forward. Or we're going to be right back here in 2 years with the regulation issue, another issue that we didn't foresee. But we need to get this right before we can do anything. Thank you.
So this is Nathan Hastings. I believe that the big picture decision of whether or not to approve the motion that's made right now and hold things off and have the commission bring this back before it submits it to the LCB or a alternative motion, which would be to make a small adjustment typographically to what's there and perhaps send it to the LCB now. That's a policy decision. That's not a legal. That's not something I can advise you on legally. That's a policy decision that's yours to make. I think I did express a way that you can put it to the LCB in the short term and still take care of making sure that you get it right. But again, that's not something I can advise you on legally. It's not a legal issue. It's a policy issue. I believe that within the framework of the regulatory process, if you were to send this to the LCB, correcting the typographical issue to make the sentence make sense, it can be further addressed in that process to make it be what you want to be and get it right, as you've said. I think that can happen. But I think that's as far as I think I can go with that in terms of giving you some advice on that. I mean, I think it can take place, but whether you want to do it pursuant to Mr. Jackson's motion or the other way I just described, that's a policy decision that's yours to make.
Commissioner Lambert, go ahead.
Commissioner Lambert, for the record, I agree with all your statements, Darren. I believe that when we send it to LCB, we get the best form of checks and balances to be legislatively and correct in all aspects of ethics and others, and we get it back already knowing some information, so when we work on it, we have a good foundation. So if we forward it now, as Mr. Hastings and I had suggested, it gives us better foundation to make any edits in the future on, in my mind, and it gets us in the queue before legislation starts, which is a concern.
I'm sorry, Nathan Hastings. Nathan Hastings, just to clarify, I don't want to disparage what Mr. Lambert just said at all, but I just want to be clear. I didn't suggest that you do that. I just said that that's an option for you.
Go ahead, Commissioner Jackson.
I agree with Mr. Almer. We've got to get this right, and 2 weeks is not going to make that big of a difference. It will make a difference. You know, again, if we have to chew this thing up and almost rewrite it when we get to the the public workshop, it's just going to make it more difficult. If we get all the input from the commissioners at a meeting, whichever way we do it, and as I put in my motion, we'd have a special meeting, I think we'll be able to get it right, move it forward. We've been at this a long time. Let's just get it right. Thank you. And I'd move that we go ahead with the motion.
One more. Michael, go ahead, Mr. Giroux.
Thank you, Commissioner Giroux, for the record. I guess my biggest input is we know it's not right. Why do we want to send it out and have them basically kick it back? It's like using them as a sounding board, but it's a 30-day window for that as well. To me, that's just not the right thing. That's wasting. And that's what we don't need to be doing.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded and discussed. Without any further discussion, let's call for a vote.
Can we have the motion restated?
Yes.
Can you restate the motion?
Paul Jackson, for the record. The motion is that we do not approve this. We do not approve the document to be forwarded. That we hold a special meeting within a 3-week time limit, where the full commission can read and give their suggestions as to what should be added or taken away from the document. And we can also get suggestions from the public. Any members of the public wishing to enter something in writing would then be able to, their thoughts would then be able to be considered at that time. So we would move, basically we would move it to a special meeting, which could be telephonic meeting. We get all the suggestions and all the things in, and the entire commission votes on that.
Is that agreeable to the seconder?
Yes, I second that.
All right, it's been moved in second. Can you call the roll? Call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Nays? All in favor, say nay.
Nay. Nay.
Nay.
Nay.
Nay.
Call for division. Call for division.
Commissioner Cox,
Can't vote anymore.
Aye.
Commissioner Elmore,
Yay.
Commissioner Baker,
Yay.
Commissioner Giroux,
Yay.
Commissioner Griggs,
Nay.
Commissioner Jackson, Commissioner Lambert,
Nay.
Commissioner Lee,
Nay.
Commissioner Richardson.
Nay.
Five yeas, 4 noes.
Motion carries. Very well. Charlie, is there more to discuss on these other documents?
There's another agenda item on a new document.
Okay. Do you want to go ahead and take...
Item number 10, the small business impact statement. As part of the regulation process, the commission has to make a statement saying how this will or will not affect small businesses. Since these regulations deal with how you apply for monies and doesn't set any stipulations on a business themselves, the committee came up with a small business impact statement that pretty much reads, the proposed administrative regulations for the grant process are not likely to impose a direct or significant economic burden upon any small business or directly restrict the formation, operation, or expansion of a small business. The Nevada Regulations Committee has determined that its regulations have no direct or significant negative effect on Nevada small businesses and have a potential of positive benefit to the economy. Comment has been solicited from small businesses and no summary of their responses provided because small businesses are not impacted by these regulations and thus not a burden or an economic impact can be assessed. So that's just a statement that we as a commission have to send to LCB when we send other documents.
Commissioner Jackson, for the record. Commissioner Jackson, for the record, I have a motion.
Go ahead, Commissioner Jackson.
I move that we go ahead and approve the economic impact statement.
Do we have a second?
John Griggs, second.
Further discussion?
Nathan Hastings from the Attorney General's office. Just one point to add to and clarify what Commissioner Cox said. The small business impact statement is also attached to the notice of public workshop that is posted, and it does go, I think, with the packet that goes to the LCB, but it also is posted with the excuse me, the notice of public workshop that would ultimately be posted. Again, along the same lines of what I brought up with the other piece, one item that, and it would be something that is just a typographical thing that in my mind at least, that could be handled and not have any action taken on because it's not been agendized for action. But the middle paragraph, the Nevada Regulations Committee, I believe would need to read the Nevada Off-Highway Vehicle Regulations Committee. And if somebody would perhaps make an amendment a friendly amendment to the motion to have it read such. And again, I believe that's an administrative thing that's not necessarily an action. But that's all I wanted to clarify on that.
I can restate my motion if that would be okay, Chair.
It would.
Chairman, through you, this is Paul Jackson. I would amend my motion to include the changes in the language as proposed by Mr. Hastings.
Thank you. Is that agreeable to the seconder? Do we have a second? It is. All right. It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
That seemed pretty close.
Delay.
I was slow in the uptake. All right. It stands approved. Kim, can you do the? We might have to do the roll call on that. Okay. Okay. Could we go ahead and do the voice vote again, and please be a little slower? Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, there's 8. All those opposed? The motion passes. Thank you. Charlie, is there any other loose ends here on the Regulation Committee report?
No, I would just urge everyone to really study that, figure out how it really works. It's set up on a scoring system. Just so the commissioners are aware, if we get 30, 50, 100 grants, you're going to have 30, 50, or 100 hours of homework to do before you come to the meeting. So when we set the time schedule for the grants, whenever we can get to that time schedule, I would strongly suggest we don't make our homework be during the holiday season.
Understood. Thank you. And thanks for your work. Yes, go ahead, Commissioner Elmore.
Commissioner Elmore, Charlie, where exactly is that discussed? One of the questions I had was the appeals process to the grant and the whole grant awarding. Where will that all be discussed? Is that in the guidebook? Is that going to be in the regulations? My understanding is that from our past 2-year experience, that needed to be in the regulations, so we had something concrete to go back on. But I don't see any of that mentioned in these regulations.
Well, there's appeals process in the regulations, but you know, the reality of it, and this is just my opinion. You know, I came from a state where this was all done on scoring, and you know, kind of the way it's supposed to work. I'll reiterate it for those who weren't in the regulations committee meeting. You know, we're gonna get a bunch of grant packets, and the advisors are gonna go through them and advise us on if they meet whatever qualifications. As commissioners, we're going to get those grant packets, and we're going to have to spend time, come to the grant meeting with our application or our score sheets filled out. The people in the room, the presenters, are going to have a chance to present to us. During that time, we may or may not change what we have in our individual score sheets, and then depending on how the chair runs the meeting, at the end of that time, even at the end of that each individual presentation, we ought to be able to pass our filled out score sheets down. And then at that point, they're just going to get tallied and averaged and set aside, and from then on it becomes math. At the end of the day, all the score sheets will be collected, tallied, and averaged, and they're going to be ranked, 1, 2, 3, and 4 in the different categories. And I honestly don't know how, if we have a tie in a category, we award 2 or 3 grants, and then 4th and 5th place are tied, but there's only money left for 1 grant. We have nothing in these regulations so far for tie breaking. We have no latitude right now. Like, there's going to be a lot that comes when this comes back from LCB. There's going to be things they change. There's going to be things we're going to want to change in the public workshops. I guess in
this is Commissioner Elmore.
Direct answer to your question. Go ahead.
I guess my question is, do we need to provide that within the regulations? And do we need to add those in? Will LCB pull that language out of NRS statute somewhere else that oversees state grants? I guess that's my question. It seems like the details of the nitty gritty, which we got caught by in our 2-year exercise here, which we discussed at length, thinking we had it, but we didn't. Is that detail going to come from LCB? Do we need to provide that within this regulation? Is it going to be in the guidebook? That's my question, is where does it need to be and where does it need to come from?
Well, I don't know what's going to come from LCB, but if there's something in here contrary to state statutes or whatever, they're going to bring that into conformity and send it back to us. The Regulations Committee thought that whatever was not covered in these regulations, the guidebook is going to have to be redone basically to conform to this. We need to make the guidebook more specific so that it meets the needs of the commission and how we want to award these money. The regulations simply, I don't know. I think the committee met several times.
Could I address this, Ms.
Cox?
Involved,
I think. Okay.
Yeah, this is Mr. Jackson. Okay, the LCB just is kind of like our attorney here. They don't set policy. They don't tell us what language we should have. They just correct and put into legal terms the language that we're trying to get across. So the answer to your question, no, LCB is not our answer. The real answer is that if it's not in regulations, it's not there. And the guidebook has to come from regulations. Kind of like we have to have constitution, and if we have a law, the law has to conform or come from the Constitution. And therefore, when we make laws sometimes, those laws are deemed unconstitutional, and that could be our same problem if we don't have everything in the regulations, because some attorney could come along and say, wait a minute, your rule book says this, but it's wrong because it doesn't conform, in my opinion, or in the opinion of the court, with the regulations. So the regulations have to be right. We have to. It's a pain in the neck. It's something we really got to go through, but we've got to really try and find every little loophole we can, and I think that's why we voted to really look at the regulations. So in answer to your short answer to the question, it must come from regulation, and LCB really doesn't help us.
So where do we go to get that help, to get it right? That's my question. Obviously, the commission we can't foresee the pitfalls, and we didn't see them all in our first exercise. So my question is, who helps us to make sure that the regulations are correct? LCB will read through them and make sure that they're legal, but who can give us the guidance to make sure that the regulations that we do in this exercise are correct and that they foresee the pitfalls and they include all of the information on how grants are going to be awarded, including the scoring process, appeals, all of the stuff that we experienced in the last 8 months. My question is, who gives us that guidance?
Darren, when I first gave the proposed ideas, I did research online from Colorado, Idaho, states that have been doing this for quite some time, and they have refined it down to pretty close to what we have. And that, other than that, I don't know where we would go to get those guidance. I've asked for some help from some other entities throughout the country that, like the Motorcycle Association and ORB on this and that. People have dealt with this on or familiar with it anyway. So that's kind of what we have to do as commissioners is do our research and garner as much information as we can.
Nathan, did you want to comment? Okay. Paul, did you have a comment?
I think it's covered. I mean, we just got to do the best job we can. I mean, I personally look at things that other states have done. I've contacted a couple of attorney friends of mine who scared the crap out of me on some of the things that can be done. So, I mean, that's, as individual commissioners, we go seek the best advice or from somebody who's either done it before or from other legal counsel who can give us advice that our state counsel can't.
Okay. Is that a fair answer there, Commissioner Elmore?
I understand. I understand. It's incredibly frustrating that we did, as individual commissioners, we did the best that we could in the first go-around, and we didn't get it right. We didn't foresee the pitfalls. And now we're stepping back after 2 years, and it's frustrating that we need hand-holding. We need guidance. We're all lay individuals coming out of the private sector, serving the state of Nevada, trying to represent our constituents who we've been asked to represent. And I don't want to waste another 2 years. I don't think anybody here does. And the regulations have clearly been pointed out that they are going to be the master rule book. And once again, I just want to make sure we get them right. So it befuddles me that there's not a state agency or somebody who can help us who have helped other commissions get this. They're just sending us down the blind path again, hoping that 9 individuals, lay individuals, get an important rule book correct, which have giant repercussions, as we all know. And we need some hand-holding. We desperately need some hand-holding. We've been trying to do the best that we can. I think that for the most part, the general public has been understanding of that. But their patience is wearing thin. I'm paying my $20 every year or whatever it is, and I'm not seeing much results. So that the bloom's going to come off the flower at some point. And so we just need to make sure we get this right. And somebody needs to help us in that process. And I'm just simply asking the question who that is and how do we get that help?
Point taken. Thank you. Commissioner Jackson? Commissioner Lambert.
Darren, would you feel more comfortable if we agendized a request as the commission to reach out and see if we could find a private counsel to help us? I might be able to get some help from people in Colorado that were very involved with the OHV regulations. Would you want to agendize something like that to authorize asking them for help?
This is Commissioner Elmer. I don't know that that's necessary. The problem, once again, is that we're working under our own set of rules, right? We're not Colorado. We're not Utah. We're not New Mexico. We're not any of the other states that we've looked at who have looked at their OHV regulations. Our destiny lies within NRS. And somebody, I mean, we're not the first blue ribbon commission to come out of thin air to have to do this. So we just need to we just need to solicit the best information that we can and hope that it is correct. So in 2 years we're not right back where we are now.
Thank you. Point taken.
Darren, Commissioner
Lambert, go ahead.
Excuse me, Chair. Darren, I'm going to request an agendized item next meeting that will allow me to reach out to people in this community and the legal side of it and see if I can find a couple phone numbers that would be availed in case we have questions by people with real experience setting up regulations.
This is Commissioner
Jackson, go ahead.
I like Commissioner Lambert's idea. I think that we should, I think at the special meeting, it should be on there that we actually hire separate counsel to help us through this. And that would be, and again, I mean, I think we can find an attorney that's done some of this type of work before and can actually advise us and sort of fill some of the gaps that Mr. Hastings isn't allowed to do.
Okay?
Well, and just to be clear there, so this is Nathan Hastings. As specific things would come up, the role of the Attorney General's office is to advise the Commission on whether certain proposals or ideas that are being discussed have certain legal implications. And the Attorney General's office is, and myself or whoever the representative is that's here for that purpose is willing and hopefully able, or at least able to try to find answers to do that kind of advising. The problem that I'm having a little bit with conceptualizing what's being discussed here is, and I don't mean this as a criticism, just as the way I'm perceiving it, it's kind of broad. It's kind of broad and vague. When you talk about someone to advise the Commission on how to do this regulatory process, if you're talking about as to policy matters, what is prudent to put in there to make sure that you're accomplishing what it's intended that the Commission would include, then my perspective is that the way that the statute sets up the Commission by having people appointed from various spheres of influence within the state, that is intended to garner expertise from various areas, and that what would be in the regulations for purposes of strategy and policy about what needs to be in there, that's not a legal issue where you need a lawyer. That's a expertise and knowledge issue that comes from all of you. You need a lawyer to help you decide what's legal and what's not legal when you have specific ideas and proposals. That's my job. So if you think you need a lawyer for the policy part of it, I'm confused about that. But just that my comment on this discussion is that I don't think you do need your hands held to know, okay, this is what's involved with these kinds of grants. We're from these 9 or however many areas the statute says we need to come from. We can figure that out. And if there's legal issues that come up when you are addressing, okay, here's this specific part of this regulation, and what there's legal issues implicated. Do we do this? Don't we do this? I can give you advice on that. That's my role. If the hand-holding is about how to do it in terms of policy and strategy, if you think you need to hire an attorney, maybe you do. I don't know. I'm not going to comment on that. But I hope I've clarified a little bit about, on the legal side of it, it's if there are legal questions, I can help you with those on specific issues. Anyway.
This is Commissioner Jackson for the record.
John Griggs.
Mr. Griggs, please. Go ahead, Mr. Griggs.
Go ahead, John.
Oh, thank you. Thanks. So let me ask you this. If you saw in the regulations workshop a piece of that regulation that left us some opportunity to be sued by a disgruntled group, would you let us know that?
I would try to if there was something apparent. And the most realistic scenario for that to come up and happen is for specific concern to be addressed to me. Now, on this, as an example, because if this is the one where there's some angst or some concern, then let's just discuss it, because on that number 9, there's a difference between issues of ethics and legal issues. They're related, but there's a difference. And the Ethics Commission handles ethics issues, and the Attorney General's office handles, for at least where the state's concerned, legal issues. And it's my understanding that related items to what's being addressed in this particular item are already pending before the Ethics Commission. It would be imprudent. It would be imprudent for anyone to try to broach that too deeply before the Ethics Commission renders an opinion on that, because the Ethics Commission could go the other way. And likewise, so like I said, on that one, that's the Ethics Commission, as Mr. Geddes advised this commission previously, is the proper avenue there, as opposed to the Attorney General's office. to answer your more broad question, yes, I would try to advise on things like if something was readily apparent to me, I would jump in and try to comment on it. And if it wasn't, and there was concern expressed by the commission, I would try to look into it. So yes, that is my role generally.
Commissioner Jackson, for the record, I think there are some policy issues that, and I've got to be honest, I'm with Mr. Elmore on this. We've tried our best to get everything right, and I really think that we need to have an attorney who is used to doing this and can give us some policy advice straight out. We don't have to bring the question up. He can say, this is what I think you should have in there, and this will protect you, and all of these things. So I definitely think we should recruit somebody. It's going to come up, and hopefully as an agenda item in the next special meeting, we can discuss it at nauseum at that time and get something worked out. Thank you.
This is Commissioner Elmer. Mr. Hastings, my frustration is not in your capabilities. I understand you have limitations. I understand what you're here to do, and I appreciate you helping us out with what you can. My frustration is that we went through this exercise. We read NRS. The issue of regulations came up. We got advice that said the statute says this, you can do this. Then we did that, and then it came back to a point where, oh my God, we need to do regulations. And so that process took 18 months. And so perhaps, yes, it can be chalked up to how you interpret the statute. But once again, we gave it our best go, and we had to circumvent. And so we need somebody who can read the statute and say, you need to do this, this, this. So maybe it's not a legal question as much as a procedural, how we proceed so that we can move forward. And that's where the struggle is right now, is in moving forward, because we don't have any hand-holding with the process to say you need to do this so that you can do the next thing, so that you can do the next thing.
Okay, and I have to admit, because I wasn't here, and I've gotten a brief overview of some of the past, but I am ignorant as to what you're talking about specifically, of what took place as far as whether to do regulations or not. So I'm not aware of exactly what you're talking about on that, but. Again, the only thing I would say perhaps to what Mr. Jackson just said in line with what we're talking about here is I think you're going to want to be, and again, I told you I'm not going to have any input to you specifically on what you do about having counsel for some other purposes, but there's going to be a strange fine line that's going to be, I would anticipate, problematic in having state counsel that is provided statutorily to give you legal advice on legal issues, even for example, concerning the procedure of the regulatory process, like how do things get submitted to the LCB? How do you have to post your notice of your public workshop? In the process of that also is my role. So when you have another attorney, perhaps, who would be here, if you're going to have perhaps conflicting opinions being given on the legal side of the role that I do have as your advisory counsel provided by the state with what some other attorney may say, that's going to be problematic.
Commissioner Richardson, this process is broken. If we add another layer to this process, it's going to be more broken. We will never get anything done if we continue to belabor these same issues over and over again. Over and over. We talk about the same thing every commission meeting. And we can't even get last meeting it was $100 for somebody to get something. We can't even agree on one simple thing. And we have $550,000 sitting out there waiting to get to these people that are sitting in front of us, and we can't even do that.
Good point. And it's not an agenda item, so we could put it for discussion on our next agenda, and hopefully everybody has a sharp idea of what they're looking for. So, shall we move on? Okay. Number 13 was request for pay for extra hours worked by our executive secretary.
This is Commissioner Richardson. I suggest that we move 14 in front of 13 so we can get Mrs. Gross paid before we talk about the new secretary getting her paid.
I'd say that's all right. who wants to provide details on that situation?
Since I'm the one that's kind of working after Mrs. Gross, excuse me, she submitted her documentation to the previous chair. I saw it. I'm looking for it in my notes, but the spreadsheet was, because of the problems we had through January, February, March, and April, she was 2 and 3 times over her allotted budget per the treasurer. So I saw it. It's good for me. And I proposed that we approve the spreadsheet that she'd already submitted. Again, Mr. Jackson, can you help me?
To be honest, I thought you were handling it because it was your motion. So I expected you to. In fact, I think I sent you an email asking you to bring the spreadsheet with you.
Okay.
Mr. Cox, I've never had a request for payment from Mrs. Gross that she has not been paid for.
Okay. All right. I can see where this is going or where it isn't. I appreciate you bringing that up. Perhaps at our special meeting, we can have a summary of what her charges are, and then if it's budgeted, discuss and approve getting her reimbursed. Would that be acceptable?
John Griggs.
Go ahead, Commissioner Griggs.
Mr. Richardson, do you have a rough idea what she's due, dollar amount?
I do. I've said, I'm sorry, Mr. Cruz, it's 2 conversations. Just give me 2 minutes.
Okay.
I have the spreadsheet on my work computer, and I do not have access to that email string here in this office.
I'd wanted to make a motion, if you could throw a rough figure at me, I wanted to make a motion that we approve it up to that rough figure, so give me a dollar amount. What was the hourly rate?
Chair?
Go ahead, Commissioner Lambert.
Mr. Griggs, I've heard a number tossed out at approximately $1,600. If you were to have a motion in that neighborhood, I see Mr. Richardson shaking his head up and down. So I think I'm comfortable with you starting with the $1,600 motion, John. I've heard that number, I believe, twice now.
Chairman John Griggs.
Go ahead, Commissioner Griggs.
I move that we approve Miss Gross' past pay up to $1,600 when she submits it to the treasurer.
John, would you accept a friendly amendment to your motion, sir?
Yes.
It would go something like this. The payment would be at the discretion of the chairman and the treasurer for up to $1,600 in payment to clear up our rear debt to Mrs. Gross.
Works for me. That works for me.
Okay, it's been moved. Is it seconded?
This is Commissioner Richardson. Can we friendly amendment that to 2K?
It's up to him.
Up to John.
Mr. Griggs?
Yes, I accept that.
Commissioner Elmore seconds. I'm not sure if there was one.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Richardson, I will have that spreadsheet to you by close of business tomorrow.
That would be fine. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
There's still ayes. There's any opposed? Very well.
Aye.
It's unanimous. We had one nay.
No, nice.
Was there any nays in there? Okay.
Yes?
Yeah, Charlie's a nay.
Oh, all right.
Okay. Very good. Yes, he is.
He earlier said that he had paid everything he requested.
Yeah. All right. Number 13. Now the request for pay for extra hours worked by our present executive secretary. Would someone like to give the details on this?
This is Commissioner Richardson. I do
This is
have
Commissioner
her.
Cox.
I have hers.
Hang on,
Cox can
Commissioner
take it.
Cox. Go ahead.
She's asking for. Yes. She's asking for 64 total hours, which is contracted at 36 hours. She's owed 28 hours. And then 120 miles at, I don't know what the mileage is. What's the mileage?
56.5.
Per.
100
Got it. 56.5 cents per mile. I move that this is approved.
Do we have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Do we have any further discussion?
Ms. Jackson,
Go ahead, Paul.
John Griggs.
can I go first, John?
Go ahead, Paul.
Thank you. The way the contract reads, it's a roughly $1,000 a month, regardless of the number of hours. And though I do believe that Ms. Miller does deserve to be paid for hours over, are we going to take into consideration those months where she was under? Are we going to deduct, for example, if it's 28 hours and she worked 20, are we going to deduct 8 hours from any other overages for the next month? That would be my only comment. The other thing is that we may want to look at, and this obviously is not part of this motion, but we may want to look at resetting the numbers, because if it's consistently over the 28, then maybe we need to set that number at 35 or 40, whatever the number is, so that we can get back to a regular, knowing exactly how much we're going to be paying every month, because obviously that's to the benefit of the commission. Thank you.
Would that be amiable for our special meeting also, just to discuss that, the hours used and how to deal with underages and overages?
I don't know if it needs to be in a special meeting, because that's starting to fill up.
Yeah.
But for the July meeting, we could reset everything. I don't think it's urgent.
Okay, fair enough.
This is Commissioner Richardson. I just want to clarify real quick. There's a spreadsheet for April and a spreadsheet for May. Her spreadsheet for April indicates that she is still owed 30 hours and their mileage has been paid. The spreadsheet for May indicates that she is still owed 28 hours and her mileage has not been paid. Is that correct? I believe I am reading it correctly.
Yeah, I know
believe
you are
that's
reading
correct.
it correct.
Okay, good to go.
I received 2 checks today from Mr. Jackson.
Chair.
Go ahead, Mr.
This
Lambert.
is Mr. Cox.
Hang on, Charlie. Go ahead, Gary.
Kim, if our motion moves forward and we get you your money now, will you be okay while we work this out with your overages that may occur within your contract? We have no ability to address your contract today. It's not agendized. So what I'm suggesting is if the commission pays you or votes to pay you as a whole, and next month you're still caught with only being able to receive $1,000, will you be tolerant of us until we get to a meeting? Because the reality is the best we can do is less than totally perfect if you run over again. But I think you'll agree. I'm just hopeful.
I will continue to track my hours, as I have been.
I understand it. I think it'd be a good faith move if we paid you and your trust level would raise and would be okay to get to an agendized meeting.
Yes.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
Charlie, you had a comment?
I just want to clarify that if the commission approves, the checks that I sent to Mr. Jackson would pay her for what she's owed for this month, or for the hours she's worked.
Let me clarify something.
Go ahead, Paul.
I think what Mr. Cox did was he believed that this the hours would be approved, so he pre-wrote the checks and gave them to me. And it's totally my fault. I should have waited until after the meeting to give her checks, but I didn't. I gave them already. So the bottom line is that we're assuming that her hours were going to be approved at this meeting. There wouldn't be any objection. I didn't have the checks from Mrs. Gross. He had sent them to me. He didn't.
That's because he didn't get her.
Right. I don't know. I mean, I can't.
He's trying to speak again.
Kim, would you like to clarify?
I have one check here stated for $446, said last half of April hours, but according to what my pay would be, it should be $1,064 for the rest of April. I'm paid for 36 hours in the month.
What? No.
I received my $1,000 plus the mileage for what would be April. So I received the $1,000 plus.
Right. Why don't we do a similar thing that we did with Ms. Gross that Mr. Richardson put forward, and basically just approve extra hours, and then have our treasurer just sort it out and make sure that he can talk directly with Ms. Miller and make sure that it is up to date and up to the penny, and that way we just approve for him to be able to do that, just like we did with the other motion.
Would you include Mr. Richardson as the former secretary, as the secretary, because he's concerned? That conversation.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Is that acceptable to Mr. Richardson?
Yeah, well, that would, yeah. I mean, Mr. Richardson would be included in that conversation. So, Ms. Richardson, if you just go ahead and make a similar motion to you did for Ms. Gross, then we can dispense with this. I'm sorry, Chair. I'm acting like Chair again.
This is Mr. Richardson for the record.
John Griggs.
I okay, so the same agreement for her as Mrs. Gross will cap it at $2,000, and then I'll send you, Mr. Chairman, the spreadsheet that I have right here in front of me. So you can approve it and then send it to the treasurer for disbursement.
We're also going to need to send the treasurer the checkbook and the accounting software. Perhaps the former treasurer can do this last item for you so it doesn't take longer.
Okay. I'm not in that process, but sure.
Okay. Is that agreeable to the seconder? Hasn't been seconded. Is there a second?
Commissioner Elmore will second.
Okay, a couple seconds. Darren was quicker on the draw. It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Oh, Mr. Griggs, sorry there.
No, my concern was covered. Thank you.
Okay. Then with no further discussion, I'll call for the vote. All in favor say aye.
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 Yes.
Aye.
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 Any nays? Very well. Passes unanimously. Thank you. I believe the last item on the agenda is public comment. Is there any public comment in Las Vegas?
I'm sorry, Chairman.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I
I believe
miss
that item number 15 has not yet been
Oh, you're right.
addressed.
You're right. Excuse me.
And if it'd be all right, I just wanted to make a comment on that before those reports are given.
Go ahead.
When this agenda was first forwarded to me for my kind of legal review on open meeting law issues, the way that it was put forth was committee reports. I believe the sentence that's there that says the NCOHV will receive and discuss the following reports concerning the updated status of the committee's activities was just as read, or as it reads there, and then there were approximately 6 or 8 committees listed with just the name of the committee. I indicated to the executive secretary that for open meeting law purposes, that's insufficient notice of what was going to be discussed. I expressed to her that she should reach out to the people over those committees and ask for just a 2 or 3 sentence blurb of a general description of the subject matter that would be part of what those committees would be reporting on. And that's necessary for open meeting law purposes. You can't just say report budget committee : and a blank, and just, you have to give a little bit more than that. So for future reference, when there are going to be subcommittee reports, please provide in your agenda items to the secretary a 2 or 3 sentence brief description of the general subject matter of what that report is going to entail. And I believe only 2 people reached back out to give some sort of a description there, and so that's why only 2 of the subcommittees are on the agenda.
Thank you, Nathan. Very well. Economic Committee, would they like to give a brief description?
Glad to help you. The Economic Committee had a couple pretty good motorcycle events that they had asked Leo to speak of.
Turn on your mic, we can't hear you.
Oh, excuse me. For the record, Commissioner Lambert, I apologize. The Economic Committee had noticed a couple large motorcycle events, and I know that one of them fell within Sheriff Lee's district, and their entire county was sold out of motel rooms, it's my belief. Leo, his office has been busy doing permits and has an additional recreational permit officer in the Carson district, and the Virginia City Grand Prix was also very well attended. I don't know whether Leo has any statement about how the BLM felt about those. I can tell you from the communities I've heard from, those are driving forces to their economy, both Lincoln County in general and Virginia City. I'm afraid we do not have data, and Zach did not come to give us presentations. So, Mr. Drum, do you have a comment?
For the record, Leo Drum. I'll keep this really brief since we're right at lunchtime. The Virginia City Grand Prix was the only event that I was able to get information on. Typically, we're having between 7,000 and 9,000 participants in that area for that event. They stay multiple days. As you mentioned, the merchants see a significant economic impact. We don't have an economist, so we can't really look at hard dollar numbers, but we can make some assumptions when over a 2 or 3 day period there are no vacancies in the area for these types of events. These also continue on with things like the Vegas to Reno race, the Silver State 300, things like that, the Mint 400, that are bringing significant economic impacts to the area. We do address those in our socioeconomic section and our NEPA documents, so those are all available as public records.
Thank you very much, Leo. There's one more significant event that might be noted to the public. The folks out there in the four-wheel drive community have had a champion of the past in Jeff Knoll, who has been involved with the founder of the King of the Hammers. And for people that don't understand what that is, it's an extreme event for Jeeps or four-wheel drives and UTVs. Jeff's original product that he promoted has now hit in excess of $70 million economic impact a year in Southern California. It's believed that the Silver State Jamboree will eventually eclipse that due to the participation of people from Q&D Construction, Wild West Racing, the Nugget, and others. The economic impact today of OHV is in the billions of dollars, and it's growing. I hope we're able to protect it. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we can move to public comment. I'm mapping left. Who's on the mapping committee? Go ahead, Mr. Mapping.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Gary Lambert for the record. The mapping committee is aware that the BLM has had a contractor doing the Pine Nut Mountain Range roads and connecting roads earlier this spring, and that they'd anticipated spending in the neighborhood of $155,000 on that data acquisition. I know that there's groups out there like the Pine Nuts and the Stewarts who are reaching out right now in the last few weeks to try to help them gather data and acquire equipment to get the trail data in place. it's important to understand that the agencies need the public's help to identify and prioritize the routes that are important to the public, because there is going to be a land use restriction, and if we don't participate, it will be difficult to justify the anger we'll have when things are closed. So we need to participate. We need to help the agencies to understand not only our priorities and criterias, but the roads that are the most significant historically. So I encourage everyone to reach out to a BLM officer, to reach out to myself, to reach out to someone involved with stewardship, to gather some data, and to fill out comment cards. You have 5 years to fill out comment cards before travel management plan's done. Take a picture of your children on the trail. Don't limit it to OHV. Take a picture walking with your dog and send it to the BLM along with the coordinates. It counts. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lambert. Last item is public comment. Any comment here in Carson City?
Laurie Calkins, I'm the president of the Nevada Four-Wheel Drive Association. I have a few comments. In the past, when we sat here, we had recommended to the commission that public comments should be changed from the beginning and the end of the commission meetings to be able to have public comment at the end of each agenda item. We've been listening about the commission needing more input from expert, but somebody that can help them. I sit here, I've been through this stuff so many times in my 40 years of land use advocacy and this sort of thing. I'm sitting here with comments that could be made that would be constructive, especially like Mr. Elmore's questions about how are you going to get it right. And I have to sit there and hold my tongue. I can't say anything. I can't get in on any of the agenda items. I consider myself expert, as do several others here that can help this commission. But we can't say anything. Open this up to being able to have public comment on each of the agenda items. And as far as who can get this information to you, you as commissioners have been provided. Charlie Cox has sent this working thing on the regulations, this document, this working, growing document to each one of you. You know what's going on. Go on out and ask your constituents, what do you think of this document? Get that input from them. Nobody ever comes and asks us. We have to come here and have to be proactive and tell you, this is wrong. Now, I also had just a question. Special meeting, I hear this being sent out. Special meeting, special meeting, special meeting. Is this something like a non-meeting? Is this open to the public? Okay, that's good. And lastly, the Silver State Jamboree that Gary brought up just shortly ago. We are partnered, the Four-Wheel Drive Association here in the state is partnered with Jeff Knoll and the Carrera Performance Group, who are the people putting this together. And we've got a week of activity going on up in, I just wanted people to know that we're very active for a very young organization. Thank you for your letting me have my input here.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Scott Gers with the Nevada Trail Stewards. Larry's frustration echoes out across, and obviously we see it in the faces of the commissioners and the frustrations that they're dealing with. And Nate, got to thank you for pushing, being assertive here and making sure that things are running the right way. It's great to see that come, and we're looking forward to dealing with you. I have some concern with a seemed to be forgotten assistant slash secretary slash whatever we want to call Joanna Schumacher that helped out the commission for quite some time. And to my knowledge, and haven't heard anything to change that, Joanna basically worked without a contract as an employee of the state, definitely did state work by sending out emails and proposals and getting that kind of work done. And I just want to make sure that she's being compensated since she's not here to represent herself. There obviously has been a ongoing history of lack of compensation from the secretaries, from obviously going back to Kathy and prior to Kathy. And when you start hurting people on their paychecks.
This is Commissioner Cox.
It's just, can I finish speaking, Mr. Cox? Or?
Charlie, hang on. Let Scott finish, and then you can talk.
Okay.
So just to, you start hurting people on their paychecks, and it really makes a big difference. Even a couple of grand is a lot of money to most people. So I know that most of you are aware of that, and I know that that's something that's going to be addressed, but I just want to make sure that it's out in the open there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Charlie, did you...
Ms. Schumacher, yes, Ms. Schumacher presented us a bill at the grant meeting, and she received a check for it. I don't have the specific amount in front of me.
I don't know where that... I have a question.
Okay. Thanks, Charlie. Commissioner Lambert?
Charlie, I'm surprised to hear that. I don't remember ever hearing a report or a motion or having hired her. And it just shocked me that you just said that we'd paid her, because I don't really miss these meetings. Are you sure we paid her? And how much did we pay her without an agendized item or authorization to hire her?
We paid her in the neighborhood of $450 to $500. I'd have to look it up. We had passed the budget in that meeting that has in it a section that is not as an employee, but as I don't have it. I don't have the budget in front of me, but all I know is
I'm not talking about the budget.
I just paid the bills that
I'm talking about the authority to issue a check to an employee that was never authorized to be hired. That's what I was talking about.
Just Nathan Hastings here for the record. I'm sorry to interject, but just let's be careful. We're drifting from the agenda here, so this could be agendized for a future agenda. I think that was already brought up, that's how that could be addressed when it came up at the beginning of the meeting.
Yeah, I think we'll have to have proper documentation on this matter to speak intelligently about it. So why don't we get that prepared, and we can agendize that in the near future. Any other public comment? Very well. Go ahead, Commissioner Elmore.
This is Commissioner Elmore. I just want to state on the record and publicly that I think at minimum that Paul Jackson's bravery and his time commitment as serving as chair as the first sheep down the path for the last couple of years should be acknowledged and at minimum appreciated by all of the OHV committee. It's not a job that I wanted. It's not a job that clearly several others didn't want. It was a no-fun job, and at minimum, his bravery and time commitment should be appreciated.
Thank you, Mr. Elmore. I appreciate that greatly. But it was a pleasure to be the chair. And again, it was a rough road, especially over the last year. And took on the job with my eyes open and knew what was going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Seconded?
Seconded, Mr. Lambert.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
I have to go slower on that opposed. Thank you. We're adjourned.
We'll have a quick lunch and I'll go over all the pending stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just do that.